My name is Joseph Epstein, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs at the Endowment of Middle East Truth. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today for our webinar. As all eyes have been set on Gaza, the Islamic Republic of Iran has not only been responsible for funding and training Hamas, but also the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria as well. In the meantime, experts from the Institute for Science and International Security, based on data from the IAEA, now report that Iran can assemble one nuclear bomb in approximately 7 days. Iran has long ago entered into the new axis of evil along with Russia and China, and has many bases throughout Latin America, threatening our own national security interests here at home. Meanwhile, although the major news outlets are not reporting this, it has been a year and a half since the Mahsa Amini's protests, which happened because of her unjust detention by the Iranian police and death at the hands of the Iranian police for not properly wearing a hijab. Emboldened by the protests, many are still wearing their hair uncovered. None of this means that loosening up of any of Iran's draconian laws, however. The people of Iran went to the polls for new elections for its parliament and its assembly of experts on March 1st. However, the ruling Guardian Council oversaw the election, deciding which candidates were eligible. Many people avoided the elections altogether, seeing them as a sham. It was actually the worst turnout in Iran's history of elections. What does this say about the future of Iran's counter-revolution? And is there any hope that the people can overthrow their suffocating regime? Here to discuss are Dr. Walid Faris, who is a foreign policy expert focusing on the Middle East and the former advisor to President Donald Trump, as well as human rights activist Giselle Shamad. Thank you guys both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
If you'd like to start, Walid, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Joseph, for giving us the opportunity. I'd like to thank Sarah for actually suggesting the idea of this webinar to share with your members and also public opinion. And that's a great opportunity, especially at these times after the Gaza war, or since the Gaza war has started. I would like to talk a little bit about geopolitics, what you just have mentioned, strategies of the Iran regime and the 5 wars and our US policy. And an extension to these geopolitics, as you just said, the battle inside Iran with the Iranian people. It's not just human rights, it's also a change in policy that we hope the Iranian people would be able to be successful in. And I'll do a little introduction to Giselle's work, with whom now we have launched a program called Educate America, which basically offers private citizens initiative to lecture, panel, conduct interviews and podcasts at the end of the day. That program exists just because our higher education is actually not producing the right answers for students. And I know EMET is an organization dedicated to truth. So we're going to bring our own truth, academic and human rights activist realities to the public. So again, thank you for giving us this platform. I will start by summarizing what many among your members and participants already know, but I'll just add a few elements. The Iran regime has, for a few years now, waged multiple wars in the Middle East, and it peaked with the October 7 genocidal attack by Hamas against Israeli population in the Negev. That's a peak. Those wars, triggered by the regime, some of them are older than others, but they're all aiming at one thing, which is the subject of our discussion today: dragging the attention, drawing the attention of the American public, of the international community, away from what's happening inside Iran, the Mahsa revolution, I call it the Iranian Spring, to elsewhere. So now we know that 90% of the media, including Western media, including American media, is focusing on the war in Gaza, neglecting what the Houthis are doing, neglecting what Hezbollah is doing, what the militias are doing against our own troops in Iraq and in Syria, over-focusing on the matter so that we don't pay attention, our public doesn't pay attention to what's happening inside Iran. And there were reasons for why the Iran regime has done that. multiple goals via one war, which is the Gaza war. Number one, Tehran wants to break down the Abraham Accord. And to do so, they want to preempt a rapprochement between the Saudis and the Israelis, which was happening, which still exists. We know that there are talks. The Saudis, MBS, spoke about it. But it kind of slowed down, if not froze, the open diplomatic engagement between Riyadh and Jerusalem. That's goal number one. Goal number two is basically to attack our troops everywhere. Syria, Iraq, Yemen, our navy is under attack, as well as the international shipping line. That is in preparation for a third goal. And that third goal is basically to go after the Iranian opposition. You just mentioned in the intro that this revolution is actually relentless. It's different from the previous waves. You know, we had 2009, we had even before 2009, 1999 student revolution, 2009 the Green Movement, and the fall of 19. Of course, Giselle will expand even more on this, and the Mahsa revolution, which is now almost 2 years long or so. So the regime knows that these revolutions are the ones that can change the government, the regime in Iran. So what they do is strike a deal with the West, which is the Iran deal. In other words, pay money to the West. And your audience is going to ask how they are paying. We are paying them. Yes, that's the essence of the Iran deal. It's a transaction. And that's a transaction that was born actually since 2009 when former President Obama reached out to the Grand Ayatollah in Iran and reached out to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and offered actually new US policies, deals. That's how the Iran deal in 2015 promised to deliver $150 billion to the Iran regime. So that's what we know. And then, of course, over the past summer, there have been fractions of this deal being executed, such as the 6 billion, 10 billion. Again, Giselle will address that. Now, everybody knows who studies transactions that there is a fee that comes back. In real estate, that's what brokers do. So the concern is, both in Western Europe and in Northern America and United States, what the Iranian regime has reinvested in our education, our academia, our media, our think tanks, our array of institutions that can shape public opinion. A lot of investment through third parties, obviously consulting and what have you, which has created an influence for the Iran regime inside the West, inside the United States. That is in a tweet I issued maybe 2 years ago, what I call the Iran regime aircraft carriers sitting inside the United States being able to influence. And the Arabs told me, Arab officials, Israelis, and others, there is something that has changed in US policy. I mean, our allies and partners do not recognize anymore this current US policy with this administration. Our troops are attacked, we're not responding strategically. We have put a lot of pressure on the Saudis, the UAE, when they were fighting the Houthis. And now we are going to, harvest the result of this policy. And the worst, of course, is what's happening in Gaza. The whole goal of this war of ideas, to make it even worse for the international community, is to say, well, the Israeli government is responsible. The Israeli government doesn't want to accept a ceasefire. And we could entertain what's happening in questions and answers. So this will bring me to say that the Iran regime has been successful in doing multiple things. Number one, in controlling Iraq, Syria, Lebanon through Hezbollah, parts of Yemen, in expanding their influence inside the United States, obviously inside the Western Europe to a certain point. And therefore, they are conducting, like a chief orchestra, these 5 wars: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, possibly cells in the West Bank, and Yemen. These are 5 wars that they have waged, that this administration is trying to contain, but at the same time being influenced by the Iran deal and therefore not finish them. People talk about endless wars. We are not finishing these endless wars because of the deal. So that would lead me to my conclusion, which I'll be happy to discuss with your questions later. It looks like the only battlefield that can change what's happening in the Middle East. And therefore, in a large segment of the world, plus all the ramifications on energy and everything else, is inside Iran. It's not outside Iran. It's within the confine of the Islamic Republic. And that is the fate and the future and the destiny of the Iran Revolution, which we've seen, which we've discussed many times, but there are some dramatic stories coming out of it, and I'd like your audience to be aware of it. The Iran Revolution, the Iranian Revolution, is one that wants to go all the way to the end. It's not about reforms inside, not about reforms of this Islamic regime. It's about to get rid of the regime. And it's not about us intervening to get rid of the regime. It's about the Iranian people being backed by us, as we did in many places. I mean, during the Cold War, did we support the dissidents? We supported Lech Walesa, Poland, and Solidarity Movement. We supported Václav Havel of Czechoslovakia. We supported actually all these voices, including inside the Soviet Union at the time. So if you are facing a threat, a totalitarian threat, a threat that has the means, like during the Cold War, the Soviet Union had the means, and now the Islamic Republic has the means, or is about to obtain the means, which are the nuclear. And if you allow me 1 minute before I close on this, the regime got the money, did not spend it, I believe, on the people of Iran. The regime spent the money on themselves, buying weapons, ballistic missiles, anti-aircraft missiles. We know it, it's in the news, it's Googleable. So we were sending the money, they were using the money to buy weapons. And those weapons are going to be deterring any action by the rest of the international community. And Israel now is confronted with this idea, which we could discuss, meaning if Iran gets to a point to use strategic weapons, what would America do? This is a big question. Another part of that money was used to create propaganda worldwide. We are up against a multi-hundred millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars, propaganda money. And thirdly, of course, in extending the influence in the United States. So I think in my conclusion that sanctions are good, should be there on energy, on everything. Everything we've got in terms of pressure is good and should be done. Unlike what's happening now, we are going away from these methods. But the crucial moment is when we change our policy towards the people of Iran, maximum support. So that is to introduce a race. We need to get there and help the Iranians, but the regime is getting there and destroying the best minds, the best voices of the Iranian opposition. And one of these voices is the father of Giselle, who's now partnering with me, but she has done a huge work even before previous years, since the abduction of her father and since the Mahsa Amini. Giselle is the daughter of a hostage, a very important hostage inside Iran, California-based, but she has been heard in Congress, like what we're doing right now, European Parliament, the Bundestag in Germany. She changed her career. She's now becoming a star of the opposition in the war of ideas, but before that, she had other career she will talk about, and that is a unique experience. That's why we partnered to add the academic background to the actual real-world background in addressing the American and international public. So Giselle Sharmat is a new voice that we need to hear, that the government needs to hear, the public in America needs to hear. So Giselle, thank you for being with us. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and thank you, Walid, for having me, and of course, the audience. Let me start by introducing my dad. My dad's name is Jamshid Sharmat. We in the family and everybody who knows him calls him Jimmy. Jimmy was doing just what I'm doing and what the opposition is doing, what dissidents and activists are doing, the same thing that Israeli activists are doing, giving the voice of the people and trying to shine some truth on this propaganda war and storm that we have in the West, unfortunately, and that's still going on. In the case of Iran, for 45 years, the regime has bought the media, has bought the academia, has bought the influences over here, and activists like my father were the ones that built channels. My dad is a software engineer. He created a website many, many years ago, before we had social media being used in such a way, where the people outside, inside of Iran were able to access the website and bring out the truth and bring out everything that's going on over there. This was a very big threat in the eyes of the regime. And they started by harassing him, harassing our family, death threats, up until 2009, when they sent assassins from the regime to Los Angeles to our door to assassinate my father. And that plot was foiled by the FBI. My father survived, but they never stopped. The regime has a track record of 45 years of assassinating dissidents all over the globe to take them out, because those are the voices of the people of Iran being portrayed outside. And that is horrific for the regime that is trying to silence everything and make it look very, very different from what the truth is. In 2020, my dad has a business trip from which he never returned. It was during the pandemic. He had a flight layover in Dubai, and that was the last time that we were able to see him, to speak to him. And they kidnapped him, took him through the border of Oman to the coast of Oman, and then we assume by waterway to Iran. So since then, for 1,319 days now, he has been held hostage at an unknown location inside of Iran. He is in solitary confinement. He has been tortured. He has been put through sham trials based on fabricated charges. He was sentenced to death last year. And last November, I think, they started a new trial on him, involving not just him, but also our US administration. The results of that trial were just published yesterday, actually, where they said both my father and the US government is being charged with criminal offenses and terrorism and whatnot they fabricated over there, and is now charged to pay $2.487 billion. Otherwise, they will execute my father. So this hostage diplomacy that we have been seeing the regime using for 45 years is still ongoing and is actually encouraged by the bad policies that we have all over the globe. We know that the Islamic regime has taken hundreds of Europeans and Americans and Canadians and Australians hostage, and every time there has been some negotiations to get some out, but leave others behind, and another negotiation, The same thing that we see right now that Hamas was doing. There was a reason that they took 250 innocent people hostage and did not just kill people and go back. This hostage-taking diplomacy, other groups and other proxies of the regime are copy-pasting that because it has worked, and they're taking these people to either kill them and scare people off, to wage terror, or to get concessions from the other governments where they want something, because we value life. We value life, and our administrations value life too, but not when it comes to dissidents. When it comes to protecting the voices that actually brought the truth, that are actually speaking out, our administration in the US has left us hanging. They had several chances. The last one was just last September, where they actually did hostage negotiation to get 5 Americans back out of the Islamic regime, and left the most vulnerable one, I would say, my father, with a death sentence behind. So that is a message that they're not sending just to the regime, but also to us dissidents, also to us activists, that when you're speaking out and when you are becoming an enemy of the terrorist regimes, we will not protect you. We leave you hanging. If they come to assassinate you, it's on you. If they come and kidnap you and take you, it's on you. If they torture you over there, nothing we can do. If we get people out, we're getting people out who probably traveled to Iran, made business with Iran, but not the dissidents and the critics. And this is very, very important for us to know that, as Walid just said, we have, when we didn't want a regime to sustain, we have supported dissidents, we have supported movements, we have supported the people, because we know the uprising comes from the people. We don't want a foreign invasion going in there and taking care of the terrorists. It's never going to work. We saw that in Iraq, we saw that in Afghanistan. It doesn't work when the people are not behind it. But what we're doing is leaving these people behind and helping the regime, taking them out. Last year, we had more than 834 executions of innocent people inside of Iran. This is an execution wave that is going on. These are the voices, these are our allies inside of Iran that want to take out the regime. They're putting their lives at stake. They're putting their eyesight at stake. We have so many people coming shot in the eyes, raped in prisons, and they're continuing to do that. Even though we don't have mass demonstrations, we still have civil disobedience. We still have parts of Kurdistan of Iran doing mass demonstrations every time somebody is executed. We still have nationwide strikes going on over there, and we still have an active diaspora for at least, most of them for 45 years, but the new generation for at least since 2022, being active, lobbying, connecting with other diasporas, the Jewish diaspora, the Middle Eastern diasporas from Lebanon, from Syria, and coming together. And we have left them hanging. And that is the biggest problem that we have right now. My dad's life is on stake right now. They're threatening him with execution coming up. And we know that they mean business because we have seen that other dissidents, for example, from Sweden, Habib Chap, who was kidnapped at the same time as my father, was executed last year. So these are not bluffs or anything. And this is the state of affairs that we are right now.
Thank you so much, Giselle, for sharing your story, and thank you, Walid, as well. So my first question is for Giselle. I want to ask, you mentioned the most recent hostage deal where 6 people were released, but your dad stayed there. If you had to speculate, why do you think it is that your dad wasn't part of that deal?
I did not receive, that was my first question, of course. Before this deal was going down, we were in a sit-in strike in DC in front of the State Department because the State Department ignored us for 3 years. They would not, like they're doing right now for picture ops, meet with the hostage families. That they're forced to do that right now because the Jewish community is so active and so loud. Otherwise, they wouldn't meet with the families right now. But other hostage families like us were ignored for 3 years. So we did a sit-in strike. They finally agreed to speak to us. And we asked them before this negotiation was going on, what is happening? And they told me, we're bringing some American hostages back, Giselle, but your dad is not one of them, without any explanation. And what we said back then, because we've been doing that for 3 years now, we know that people who are left behind are being murdered. We know that Bob Levinson, a patriot from America, was left behind. He did not make it out of there. So knowing that, I asked them, what are you going to do about my dad who has an execution coming up? Well, how can you hinder them from murdering my father? How can you ever get them out if you're paying ransom and increasing the price per head to $1.2 billion per hostage? How do you think in the future you can get anybody else? And what about the future hostages? And they said, what future hostages? Well, first, fast forward, we saw 250 future hostages happening there. And this is just the beginning. I mean, we have Hezbollah, we have everybody else. They will continue doing that if we don't stop it. So we've not gotten a response back, but we have a solution to their problem. And that's why we've been going back and forth between Europe, the European Parliament, the Germans, and over here. We need a global task force. This hostage diplomacy that the terrorists are doing is not an individual case. And families should not be, first of all, the ones that are doing the hard work. It should be governments coming together. When we put the leverage of all of these countries, for example, that have hostages in Gaza right now, that have hostages in Iran right now, together, we have immense leverage over these terrorists. But what we don't do that. We let them blackmail us. We put pressure on, for example, Israel right now to get the hostages out, instead of putting pressure on Hamas and the Islamic regime to get the hostages out. We're working backwards. So the first step that we can take is a global task force that will say, it doesn't matter from which country you're taking a hostage, you will get a response from all of us together. This is step one that we have to take. Second, we have to address why my father or dissidents are being left out. So instead of just making them equal to all the other hostages, I would argue they should be prioritized. They should be prioritized by leaving them behind. We're sending a political message that we don't care about dissidents. We don't care about these movements that are going on and freedom. And we don't care. We will always choose the regime over anybody like that. We have to reverse that. We have to say, when people out of their own pocket and time and energy come forward and do activism for human rights, for bringing out the truth, we as a democratic country stand behind them no matter what. So that would be step 2 that we need to do.
I couldn't agree more with you, Giselle. So my next question is, when it comes to the Iranian opposition, you really see a plethora of groups. Some that support the Shah, some that want democracy, certain minority groups that want more autonomy. And so far, it seems like they really haven't been able to come together. So I wanted to ask you, do you see a possibility in the future of an Iranian opposition organizing and coalescing? And if so, how do you think that would come about?
Most certainly this will happen. This actually happened last year when we had a coalition formed from the Crown Prince up until the left, Kurdish people. Like it was a big array of like different fractions of the opposition coming together in Georgetown. When the regime sees this happening, this is a bigger alarm than a war with military force, actually. The opposition coming together is what will put an end to the regime, and they know that. That is how the regime got into power 45 years ago. They formed a coalition between the Islamists and the communists and every fraction in the middle to be able to topple the Shah, who was actually backed by Western forces. So if they were able to do that, they knew that when the opposition is able to do that again, they will be taken out. So they have put great investments, be it money, be it propaganda, be it cyber armies that are going after these people. And the Georgetown meeting that we had last year was the biggest threat, where they started a propaganda war and splitting the opposition. The opposition is very aware of that. There are, of course, like fractions that engage in fights. That is normal. That is what you have in every society. We can look at the Democrats versus Republicans when they're trying to go for a candidacy. They will bite each other's heads off. But when their country is in danger, when it comes to human rights, when it comes to their basic constitution, they all think the same. And the same is true for the Iranian opposition. They are portrayed as much more being an enemy, and they have a history, of course, of not liking each other, but that's normal. We can get them back together. But the first step is from our governments, actually. Our governments have failed to talk to the opposition. They have failed to give them a platform. They have failed to stand behind them. Besides words that we have seen so far, we stand with Iranian people, which means bloody nothing if you're backing the regime with everything else that you're doing. We have only seen words. So we need a stage and communities that bring people together and that can help us to form this opposition.
Can I add on what she answered? It's very important.
Of course, please.
Thank you. I'll just give you examples from history to illustrate where we are, where they are, and where the US should be. During World War II, of course, the Nazi occupation, the French resistance or opposition, you had resistance inside France. You had de Gaulle and others in Britain and elsewhere, and they both coordinated. They didn't like each other. And the proof is that when de Gaulle came back to France, he was not elected as president. So it doesn't have to be that one leader can do it, but you need a leader, international leader to be recognized, so on and so forth. In the French resistance opposition movement, you had Republicans, you had the Communist Party, very powerful Communist Party. And in normal times, they'll be like slaughtering each other politically. But they came into France, formed a national unity government, ran an election or two, and France came back very quickly. Even in other cases but the US has to play a role. I mean, Afghanistan wouldn't have been able to sustain, even if it failed, had the US at the time not gathered the loyal Georgia in Germany. They got all the exiled into Germany. They formed you need an address, a PO box, a legitimacy, and that influence inside Iran. If the US plays its role, the real US playing the real role, that would impact the Iranian opposition. The work is on the Iranian opposition, as is the case for Lebanon. Lebanon has the same case, a smaller case. The opposition is completely atomized, like very much divided, even more than the Iranians. It has been infiltrated by the Hezbollah regime. The Iranian opposition infiltrated. Iraq is in chaos. Outside the Kurds, even the Kurds have been infiltrated. I met with Prime Minister Masroor Barzani a few weeks ago in Washington, and he's the only entity still resisting the onslaught of Iranian militias and Daesh, etc. He told me they are even here in Kurdistan. So aside from the billions of dollars that Giselle mentioned, about using it for lobbying, they are paying money inside the Middle East. They are dividing the Lebanese, they are dividing the Kurds, they're dividing the Sunni tribes, so on and so forth. So I agree with Giselle. We need to have an administration which has a team that is strategic, that is intelligent, that works with all the oppositions, very close to one stage I knew personally, because I worked with them, when that was under the Trump administration in the second and third year. This one special desk, it's not just envoy group, but as somebody who coordinate all policy to isolate the regime. And once there will be another administration or another policy of this administration, I don't believe so, but once this exists, then we need to have the best organization to address the Iranian regime challenge and be very close to our allies. What's happening now, I'm sorry I'm extending, between the Biden administration and the Netanyahu government, that should not exist. We should be shoulder to shoulder with the Saudis, with the Egyptians, with everybody. Where is the Arab coalition? Where's the Abraham coalition? They don't want it here in Washington because of the Iran deal. So unless we have an administration that would free its hands from the Iran deal, go back and then sit down with the Israelis, the Arabs, the Iranian opposition, and others, then it's going to be very difficult.
Thank you so much. So last question when it comes to the Iranian opposition. Iran has a very significant minority population, according to some estimates, and it's hard to say the exact number because Iran doesn't have any official census for this, but according to some estimates, up to 50% of the population is actually different minority groups such as the Azerbaijanis, the Kurds, the Arabs, the Baluch. I wanted to ask, a lot of these populations are even more disaffected than Persians. For example, their regions are neglected, they struggle with unemployment, there are much harsher policing methods, they're very often discriminated against. So I do want to ask, how can the opposition reach out and include these groups to become even stronger? Because they in a lot of their regions, they make up the majority, and they are located in very strategic areas, such as, the borders with Iraq, the borders with Azerbaijan, the borders with Pakistan, etc.
I could go for the first part, and then you do the heavy lifting because you're Iranian, American, German. First of all, on issues of statistics and numbers, there are all kind of wild numbers right and left. I think 50% is a little bit exaggerated. I've seen the real ethnic maps of the real research by the CIA, which has the best book, CIA book, but in the 90s, and I don't think things have changed big time. The estimate that we have, that the most optimistic number is 38 for the minorities. Most Iranians believe it's 30, 32, but still that's enormous. I mean, 32 is bigger than it's the Hispanic and the African Americans here in America at this point in time. But the issue is not about numbers. The issue is about basically the relationship between the majority and the minority. So what is very important in any case, I teach ethnic conflict. So I've seen many cases for many years, and I'm a product of Lebanon, God knows, 18 communities. That's even more than anywhere else in the Middle East. The mutual recognition is the most important principle. Mutual recognition is that for the majority to recognize the minorities. Once you recognize them as minorities, immediately you're going to have a list of recognition. I mean, what is Switzerland? Switzerland is a collection of ethnic minorities. Nobody asked how many Francophone, how many German, how many Italian speaking. It's in the Constitution, period. And they live in one of the best countries in the world. They could adapt after the Khomeinists, after the Islamic Republic. They could constitute and create any constitution. They could go from decentralized with cultural rights all the way to federation. I mean, here in America or in Germany, you have the Landers. You don't feel you go, have lunch in one place and then dinner in another place, go back home. That's what I tell my fellow Middle Easterners when they ask me about federation. I say, I live in, I don't want to say the state. I go to DC, I have lunch, I go have dinner in another state and come back. So these matters on how Iranians will decide about their organization. Once they are freed from the Khomeini regime, because as Giselle said, the regime plays even on the minority-majority issue completely. You know, Lebanon, Hezbollah does the same. Lebanon, Hezbollah has penetrated the Christian community. That has never been seen before. So in Iran, you're right. Some of these ethnic minorities are located on borders. Maybe this is a result of what? Of the old empires who became, you know, states, republics, kingdoms, so on and so forth. What is important, and she was mentioning about the achievement that the opposition did in Georgetown University. They have achieved a coalition never seen before. So the second wave, in my view, and Giselle hopefully will play a role in it as a moderator, is to have a mutual recognition, to have a, if not proportional representation, because they're going to have an opposition with an institution. You need to have more than a coalition, an institution, like with a council representing the various groups. I would love to see a Kurd, a Baluch, a Azeri, a what have you, from Khuzestan or Ahwaz, in proportion with what the real majority is in. So you reflect the Iranian people inside the country in a coalition outside the country. Everybody will be happy. The minority, even with one person, say, oh, we are represented. And then the international community, the American public, the European public, when they see a multicolored one with real proportion, because some of the people take it to the extreme, either no minorities or the minorities are 60%. Come on, let's be real. Reflect what it's on the inside, but the one common cause is to get this regime out. And then you could do a transition. We could help them to do the transition. And then they are among the smartest people in the Middle East, right? The Iranian Persians. I will see a favorable history if they get to pass those two lines, meaning mutual recognition and mutual representation. I don't know if you want to.
I think you said everything.
No,
already.
not everything.
Maybe two drops that I can add on is like we have shown already. I mean, the regime's worst nightmare is that all of the Iranian factions work together. That's why they're putting all of these propaganda and internal wars into it, even within the ethnic minorities. Like we have several factions in Kurdistan, and they are pushed against each other. But putting that into the minds of the people that these minorities will be separatists, they will do this, they will do that. Why it's actually the Islamic regime that is separating and that is doing all of this stuff. That the diaspora has seen already. They have overcome it already, because if we remember 2022, all of Iran went on the streets for a Kurdish girl, Mahsa Amini. They are using still the Kurdish slogan, Jinjian Azadi, women, life, freedom is from there. So inside of Iran, there's no problem acknowledging we all want the Islamic regime to go on. Outside of Iran and the diaspora, we have actually the same thing, because in these 3.5 years that I've been fighting for the life of my father, I have been in contact with all fractions, all minorities. I have people from Baluchistan doing Twitter spaces for my father, who is an monarchist, and we have people from who are communists making a campaign for my father again. Like these people, when it comes to our dissidents and how they're stepping up when it comes to human rights, we can connect them. Just last month, we launched a global campaign called Cut the Rope in recognition of the execution wave that is going on. In one day, over 123 known public figures from all over the globe, from all over the fractions, came out in support of this Cut the Rope campaign. We had people from Israel, we had Emily Schrader, we had Hillel Neuer, we had people from Sudan, we had people from Iraq,
from Darfur,
Syria, Darfur, where there's an actual genocide going on. We had people from America and everywhere. So when I can, with a simple campaign, can get everybody together, of course, we can do this. It is an illusion. It is propaganda to tell us that we cannot do this, to stop us from doing it. We are very close in this world.
One more addition, she provokes more thinking about it. I also speak with, as a non-Iranian, as American non-Iranian, with communities. So when I was appointed as a presidential nominee advisor, that was a great experience, because many in the Middle East reached out to me the second time I was appointed. Arabs, Israelis, of course, and Iranian opposition, ethnic groups inside Iran. So I'm saying this probably for the first time in front of Giselle. I asked those Kurds, and I asked the Ahwazi and some Baluchis, not much with the Azeris, because we didn't have an opportunity. I said, well, if Iran is liberated from this regime, what do you actually want to see happening? They said, we are ethnic so and so, but would love to be part of a huge country that is modern and, Iran, that's a super country in the Middle East. All we need is to have our language, our schools, our representation. They look at Belgium, they look at Switzerland, they look at other countries, and they're much bigger. Now, of course, there are always factions who are nationalists, who would like to separate. But even those who want to separate, they want to also become modern countries. So nobody is actually with the regime. But the majority, it seems to me, the majority of the civil societies in these ethnic areas wants sort of a mutual recognition, federation type, and they'll be so happy to drive from Sanandaj all the way to Tehran, and do what we do here. Our beautiful, huge country is multi-ethnic at the end of the day. So that would be the addition I wanted to do. Plus, she mentioned Darfur. I have a special story on Darfur. So Giselle was added to a delegation of NGOs back in December, who are Middle East Americans, Lebanese, Syrians, Iraqis, Kurds, South Yemenis, and also Sudanese and Darfuris. It was a beautiful, real coalition that went to the United Nations. She and we, because I was with them as an advisor, met with members of the Security Council. Actual communities in Lebanese and Iranians were not able to get there, but when they saw a coalition, that's impactful. And of course, the Jewish American community was ahead of us in this issue. So in America, it was possible to establish a multi-ethnic regional coalition, let alone in Iran. Of course, if they have the right architects in this issue, and keep saying the United States government and Congress, which is very responsive. We've been meeting with many in Congress, but the US administration, hopefully this one, most likely the next one, will have to have a different free Iran policy.
Thank you both. That's a very great answer. So we actually have a question from our president, Sarah Stern, who's asking if you could go into a little more detail naming the pro-Iranian regime groups and individuals that have so successfully infiltrated the administration in Capitol Hill.
We could do, both of us, a little bit of this one. We are sensitive to naming names for legal reasons, at least in my case. But all what I can say is look at the Wall Street Journal newspapers, Google. First I'll start with the most sensitive matters. So I'm going to be abstract, but I'm going to invite Sarah and others to look online. We have articles naming individuals. I'm going to name one at least. Adriana Tabatabai. It's named, and I didn't do the research, so journalists did the research. She is Iranian American who was hired by the team that worked with the Obama administration and then with the Biden administration in negotiations with the Iran regime. So this is clear. There is no interpretation or jurisprudence about it. And there are other names. She has been sending emails to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Iran regime. I mean, this is, if the American public realized what was published, but of course the rest of the mainstream media is not really exposing this. For much lesser, they did huge coverage of it. And asking, this was like striking to me, and asking the foreign minister or whomever represented him, what do you want us to say in our meetings with our Iranian American officials? I mean, what can we qualify this? She is serving the highest positions in the US administration. You know how level of clearance? Through the roof. About how they can serve the Iran regime. I mean, legally speaking, I'll let lawyers talk about it, but this is not possible. And of course, even the chief negotiator, what's his name? Who's now? Robert Malley, under investigation. I met him one time in the media, and he's soft-spoken, he knows the stuff, but he's the chief architect of the Iran deal, under investigation, and the government, the administration wouldn't tell us about what. To such a point, we were speaking with members of Congress this morning, and they doubt that the fact he's under investigation is to investigate him or to shield him from real investigation from Congress. And there are other names. So my concern is that our government, the national security part of our government, has individuals, very high ranking, who are reporting to our leadership. When Biden says something, President Biden says something, what do you think he's going to bring that thing? From the briefs, the intelligence brief, we are familiar with it. And who is doing those intelligence briefs? The people in charge. Who's influencing them? The Iran regime. So you're telling me that Tehran is influencing our analysts who are proposing policies to our... This is the worst case of national security breakdown. And in addition to that, of course, I mentioned that the Iran regime, through the Iran deal, meaning through us, Americans and Europeans, has been funding educational institutions, academia, media. How much influence that has over us? You remember during the so-called Russia dossier investigation, it was found that maybe Russia influenced 10 or 20 Facebook accounts. God, I mean, Facebook accounts, and here the influence is over thousands of colleges, thousands of universities. We are in deep trouble in terms of foreign influence, and it looks like the real foreign influence is coming from the Islamic Republic and from the jihadi Ikhwan regarding Israel, regarding our policy. We never had a doubt about US-Israel relationship. Now we are having doubts. Our leaders are talking about our interests are not converging. So we have been exposed to a war of ideas, a war of lobbying that the Iran regime has instigated with the money of the Iran deal. That's the conclusion of my book. Anyway, if you want to add, I'll be happy to listen.
I think that's another reason. Like we had right before October 7th, we had Semaphore and Iran International bring out a report where they are showing what is called the Iran Experts Initiative that is stretching from Europe till America, is infiltrating and everything. That's where they name Mustafa Tabai, Ali Boys, and other people, Robert Malley. But this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
The people whose emails prove what we have been saying for 45 years. I think it's easier to follow the Iranian diaspora because before it comes into the media, into the mainstream media, we are already saying like these and these and these and people in this field, these people in Congress, these people in media, these people CNN, their CNN report that just came out with Zakaria. Everything, after some time, you know what the narrative of the regime is. You can spot it, you know, like what the words are. And the diaspora has done a great job pointing out who these people are. And then after years, it comes into the media, then it is exposed. And as soon as it's exposed, like what happened last year, the Islamic regime strikes somewhere, used Hamas to murder so many people and shift the attention away from these investigations that were just starting to go on. So that is also another intention of doing
That's
this.
very interesting. This report that you mentioned was few days or weeks before...
A few weeks before October 7th.
The Gaza attack.
Everybody in Congress was outraged. They were starting investigations. How come that this person works in the Pentagon and is doing that? After that, not a peep.
All the attention.
Everything went away. They are still in office. They're still working there. And that is just, as I said, the tip of the iceberg, because it is not just these people who are lobbying. Most of them, as Dr. Faris said, is the companies that were making money out of out of the Iran deal. These companies don't come forward with their names and everything, but you can see their outcry when, for example, Trump pulled out of the Iran deal. Oh, what happens to our billions of dollars that we are losing over here? We have Iranian diaspora members going to the colleges right now in Princeton. There is Mousavian, who they're trying to get out, who's involved in mass murders inside of Iran. So I think it's a good resource to follow the diaspora. So when we name names, we make ourselves liable for lawsuits.
But we are fine legally. Sarah wants even more answers. So between Giselle and me, we provided what is public. But let me go into what is not public, but is actually public reachable. There are American companies, American-based companies, of course, in addition to West European companies, that's open there because they don't have a legal problem, who have signed contracts with the regime, or at least negotiated with the regime's huge contracts with billions of dollars, waiting for the moment we're going to reestablish this relationship. You're going to go and capitalism is capitalism. I don't blame them. They want to make money from, but they're doing so. Like, I'm going to give an example. AT&T has a multi-billion dollars contract to be executed by the Iranian regime. General Electric, the other, airlines who have been making those kind of contracts, multi-billion dollars. So where I am nervous, it's not that they sign contracts, but they become a lobbyist force for the Iran deal. Who is putting pressure on the Biden administration? They tried to put pressure on the Trump administration, but they failed because Trump also is a deal maker. You understand that. So we have to pay attention not just to the Iran lobby per se, but the Iran deal lobby is much larger. It's $100 billion contract worth of issues.
You mentioned some pretty big companies there. I'm wondering, is this information that's available in the public?
Yeah, I'll tell you quickly, Sarah and our friends at Emmet. Every contract they mentioned, I didn't go and I don't have the money to investigate. You just Google. Let's suppose AT&T in this case, and what's the other bigger one company that Boeing. Boeing is just now after the show, go Boeing contract Iran, and you'll see how many billions of dollars. So it's not that difficult. It's that the other side, the lobby, has stopped any investigation into this. And I'm not blaming the companies again for doing business. Do business, make money, but not with this regime. And if it's with this regime, don't lobby our administration and stop our reaction to the militias because you have those contracts. So this is another way of saying every time the US does not respond to Iran regime attack in Syria, in Iraq, against Israel, in Yemen, it's because phone calls are going from these companies. And if they have a lot of money, it means they have a lot of influence. You know how our government works. We are made of lobbyist agreement. And that is what is very dangerous to us.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to, we have quite a few questions in the Q&A, especially about how the Biden and previously the Obama administration view Iran. Some are saying, do they view them as the regional hegemon that should be? I wanted to ask, do you agree with that? Do you think that's how the administrations view them? And if not, how do you think it is that both the current Biden administration and the previous Obama administration view Iran and Iran's role in the Middle East?
Well, I will begin by saying it's a combo of everything. It depends who in the administration, who's behind the administration. Let me just begin by saying the companies, they don't care what Iran will be, what is the future, what is the past, who's the next government. They want money, they want the deals, they want the contract. So I'll put them on this side. With regard to pressure groups that are, pressuring the Obama and then the Biden administration, with the Biden administration, it's really an issue of influence, sheer influence, because Biden himself, we saw his history record, he doesn't go over these matters. Obama platform is different. It's transformative. It wants to change the Middle East. And if you read and hear the statements, and I was, since I was also an advisor to Romney in 2011, 2012, I was preparing his speeches, part of it, to the debate with Obama. So I studied every single word. I'm a decade-long person who deals with this matter. So yes, he wants to transform them. There is a faction in America, which is far left plus the Islamists, who wants to use US foreign policy to transform the Middle East. And yes, they want to have two deals in the region. I'm not talking about Russia, Latin America, which is a different issue of far left. The Middle East, what this faction, which is omnipresent on our campuses, want is to have two deals. One with the Iran regime, meaning the Khomeinis, the Islamist Iranian leaders, that would cover Iran and Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Yemen. That is the one Khomeinist empire put in one. You do deals with them. You do deals with Tehran. That covers everything else. And the second one is Sunni-based Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan, that used to have Morsi. If you remember when he was a president of Egypt, there was excellent relations with the Obama administration and Qatar and the Islamists of Tunisia, of Libya, of Morocco, and elsewhere. So they have a dual vision in the Middle East and a very weak, friendly vision to Israel. That's why you see that US pressures on Israel started under the Obama administration and are incredible today. Today when Israel is fighting the top jihadists of the Middle East in Gaza, we're telling them, as I said earlier, ceasefire and the two-state solution. We are like negotiating in the place of the Israelis. You cannot do that with your ally. The allies cannot come and tell America what kind of president you're going to elect. We cannot tell them what kind of prime minister they're going to elect.
Thank you. So I have one question. I know we only have 5 minutes left, but I think this one's important. If, for example, Dr. Faris, Giselle, you guys were both in the Situation Room, of a new administration, and you were able to help come up with the Iran policy, what would your recommendations be?
Giselle and I discussed this matter because that kind of question come up with community engagement and with media. So we are doing our homework, and of course with other think tanks, with other coalitions. Our group, we did an estimate of this question in a situation room or with the national security circles. What are the priorities of the next administration? Because there will be a lot of priorities. We are minus 100. We're going to bring it back to 0. And from 0, we're going to go up to 10 and 20. There is no magic solution. We get questions from Middle Eastern Americans or from people in the Middle East and Europe. You know, what is it that you're going to be able to do? Not us, but a future administration. How would you advise it? And I get a lot of these questions, and Giselle as well. Well, first of all, bring us back to 0. What is bring us back to 0 in the first 6 months? Stop immediately the negotiations of the Iran deal. You got to stop it. Second, stop transferring every single dollar to the Iran regime. You cannot be negotiating and sending money. So you're not negotiating at the end of the day. 3, and that's what Giselle is good at in spreading the education, maximum support to the Iran people, and prioritize those who are active on the ground. Prioritize those with NGOs here and around the world. So this would be a new policy. Unite the Iranians who are okay with this platform. That's what Giselle's program is about. We unite them, but on a clear platform. Then with regard to Muslim Brotherhood, same thing. And then immediately, number 3, you regather the Arab coalition. That's a maximum achievement. It took years to get to the Arab coalition. I spoke with many leaders, including now, I don't want to name, of the Arab coalition. They will be back. People are concerned that now there is a distancing between them, between Saudi and Israel. No, we know. We speak with both of them. And at the end of the day, you're going to start to encourage across the Middle East initiatives for peace, initiatives for freedom, and let these societies decide what they want. So in conclusion, we're going to suggest to create the largest task force, but this time at a state level. We're going to have all of NATO working with these Arabs, with Israel, with the oppositions to begin the change, and up to the Middle Easterners to continue the change.
Yes,
Agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Like that is what can be shared with the public, of course. I wanted to add, just like you said, we're almost out of time, where they can, you guys can find us on social media, because we do a lot of like briefings of certain situations. We have videos on the ceasefire. We have videos on South Africa taking Israel to court. We have videos on safe zones, what constitute as safe zones, and those things. And I think it's a good platform to share that. We have it on Instagram. My Instagram is Free Jamshid Sharmat, where you can find us, and where you can also find the diaspora, like people who want to work together, people who have done this for a long time. They can see through the propaganda. They are reaching out to connect with people. And I think the bigger our community gets with like-minded people all over the globe, the stronger we will be in first educating the people. So we don't have to go from university to university. We can do it online as well. Mm-hmm. And the stronger our voices will be, and the better we can develop a new Iran policy that is needed.
So basically, invite us as panels anywhere you can, and we'll help you.
We're always happy to. No, with that, I'd like to say goodbye to everyone. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Walid Faris and Giselle Sharmad. Thank you so much. This has been very informative. And thank you to our audience as well for tuning in. If you like the work we do, if you like these webinars, please consider donating to Emet. You can find us online at emetonline.org/donate. And if you really enjoy the webinars, please consider sponsoring as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.